The iron gates of Blackwood Manor did not swing open so much as they groaned, a rusted, screeching protest against the modern world. Evelyn stood at the threshold, her dusty sedan idling behind her, looking at the inheritance she never asked for. She was a botanist by trade, accustomed to orderly glass greenhouses, labeled specimens, and the predictable, quiet life of flora. But this was a chaotic, suffocating wilderness. Her great-aunt, Rosemary, had died in her 90s, a recluse who hadn't been seen in the nearby village for 3 decades. The rumors said she lived off the land. The rumors said she was mad. But looking at the estate, Evelyn only saw an aggressive, untamed botanical anomaly. The manor house itself was a crumbling Victorian Gothic structure, but it was entirely secondary to the garden. It stretched out for acres, enclosed by high brick walls topped with broken glass. Even from the gates, the scent was overwhelming. It wasn't the sweet, delicate perfume of a traditional English garden. It was thick, cloying, and heavy with a sweet, honeyed rot that coated the back of the throat like oil. Evelyn grabbed her duffel bag and her research kit, stepping onto the overgrown gravel path. As she walked toward the house, the flowers seemed to crowd the walkway, leaning inward. She spent her first 3 days cleaning the interior of the house, trying to ignore the garden outside. But the garden refused to be ignored. At night, the scent grew heavier, seeping through the gaps in the window frames until Evelyn's dreams were plagued by images of choking vines and faces made of wet soil. On the 4th morning, she decided it was time to begin her cataloging and pruning. Armed with heavy leather gloves, shears, and a notebook, she stepped out into the sunlight. The air was dead silent. No birds chirped. No bees buzzed among the millions of vibrant blooms. The silence was absolute, a heavy, suffocating blanket. She began at the center of the garden, where a massive, circular flower bed surrounded a dry stone fountain. In this bed grew a species of flower she had never seen before. They stood waist-high, with thick, fleshy stalks like celery, and massive, bell-shaped blooms of a translucent, milky white. The centers of the flowers were choked with a dark, sticky nectar that looked remarkably like clotted blood. "What are you?" Evelyn whispered, fascinated. She reached out, her gloved hand gently touching a petal. The moment her finger made contact, the petal twitched. Not from a breeze, the air was perfectly still. It pulsed, a rhythmic, muscular contraction, tightening around her gloved fingertip. Evelyn gasped and pulled her hand back, tearing the glove free from the flower's surprisingly powerful grip. She stumbled backward, her heart hammering against her ribs. Must be thigmotropic, she reasoned scientifically, her mind desperately clinging to logic. Like a Venus flytrap, only on a massive scale. A predatory defense mechanism. Determined not to be frightened by a plant, she picked up her shears and decided to prune a patch of overgrown nightshade nearby. She snipped a thick vine. A sharp, high-pitched hiss echoed through the garden. Evelyn dropped her shears. The sound hadn't come from an animal. It had come from the earth itself. Where she had cut the vine, a thick, white, milky sap was oozing out, but it wasn't dripping down. It was bubbling, smoking slightly as it touched the soil, and the scent of honeyed rot spiked so fiercely that Evelyn had to cover her nose to keep from gagging. Then, the wind picked up, not a natural wind, but a localized, spiraling gale that whipped the petals of the white bell flowers into a frenzy. They began to sway in perfect unison, clacking against one another with a sound like hollow teeth. The shadows beneath the bushes began to stretch, detaching themselves from the roots and pooling into the center of the pathway. Evelyn watched in paralyzed horror as the darkness coalesced, rising from the earth. It didn't have a human shape, not truly. It was a shifting, towering mass of tangled briars, rotten roots, and weeping black vines. But at the top of the mass, woven from thousands of thorns, was a mockery of a face. 2 hollow cavities stared at her, filled with the shifting, glowing embers of decaying foxfire. Its jaw was a jagged fracture of split wood, and when it opened, the stench of a shallow grave washed over her. This was the terrible spirit of the flower garden. Who spreads the blood of my children? The voice didn't rattle her eardrums, it vibrated in the marrow of her bones, heavy and wet, like heavy stones dragging through mud. Evelyn fell backward into a patch of roses. The thorns tore through her jeans, biting into her flesh, but she barely felt it. She scrambled away on her hands and knees, staring at the apparition. I was just pruning, she stammered, her voice a pathetic squeak. I'm Rosemary's niece. The estate belongs to me now. The spirit tilted its horrific head. Vines slithered out from its torso like striking vipers, pinning Evelyn's ankles to the gravel path. The thorns on the vines dug into her socks, drawing blood. Rosemary tended the flock, the spirit droned, its voice filling the entire courtyard. Rosemary understood the bargain. The garden dances. The garden blooms. But the garden must be fed. Fed? Evelyn choked out, trying to pull her legs free, but the vines only tightened, the thorns burrowing deeper into her skin. For 30 years, the old woman brought the meat, the spirit hissed, its wooden jaw clicking violently. The stray beasts. The wandering men. The flesh to macerate in the dirt. The blood to drink from the deep wells. Now, she is gone. The soil is parched. The children are hungry. Evelyn's mind raced, putting together the terrifying pieces of her great-aunt's reclusive life. The missing person reports in the local papers. The pristine, lush growth of a garden that should have died under neglect. Rosemary hadn't been crazy, she had been a cultist to a god of fertilizer and rot. I can leave. Evelyn screamed. I'll give you the house. I'll never come back. You are here, the spirit whispered, its form collapsing downward, sliding across the gravel toward her like an avalanche of decomposing vegetation. And you are so full of dew. A thick root burst from the ground directly beneath Evelyn's hands, wrapping around her wrists and slamming them into the earth. She was pinned spread eagle on the path, staring up at the bright blue sky, completely betrayed by the nature she had loved her entire life. The massive white bellflowers began to bend toward her, their fleshy stalks stretching like necks. The dark, bloody nectar dripped from their petals, landing on her face, her neck, burning her skin like acid. The spirit loomed over her, its face of thorns just inches from hers. The foxfire eyes burned with an ancient, unyielding malice. Nature wasn't kind. Nature wasn't peaceful. It was a hungry, mindless consumer, and she was nothing but organic matter. No, Evelyn thought, a sudden surge of adrenaline overriding her terror. I am a botanist. I know what kills plants. Wait, she shrieked, her voice cracking. If you kill me, the estate goes to the state. They will bring bulldozers. They will bring salt. They will tear out every root, every bulb, and pour concrete over your heart. The spirit paused. The clicking of its jaw stopped. The vines around her wrists remained tight, but they ceased their burrowing. Concrete, the spirit repeated, the word sounding like a curse. Yes, Evelyn gasped, tears of pain and fear streaming down her cheeks. They will kill the garden. But if you let me live, I can keep it safe. I can bring you what you need. I know how to care for things. I know how to make things grow. The spirit stared at her for what felt like an eternity. The silence of the garden returned, heavy and expectant. Slowly, the spirit's form began to unravel. The tangled briars loosened, sinking back into the earth, blending into the shadows of the bushes. The roots releasing her wrists slid back into the dirt, leaving deep, bleeding furrows in her flesh. But the voice remained, echoing from every leaf and every petal around her. The bargain is renewed. 1 moon, girl. 1 moon to drench the wells. If the children thirst, we will start with your eyes. The wind died down. The white bellflowers snapped back to their upright positions, their translucent petals shimmering innocently in the afternoon sun. Evelyn lay on the gravel path for a long time, her breathing ragged, staring at the sky. Her body was covered in scratches, her blood mixing with the damp earth beneath her. Slowly, painfully, she pushed herself up. She looked at her hands, stained with soil and sap. She looked at the massive white flowers, which seemed to be waiting, watching her. She didn't run to her car. She knew she couldn't. The gates were closed, and she could feel the unseen roots waiting beneath the gravel, ready to trip her, to drag her down into the dark. Instead, Evelyn walked into the house, washed her wounds, and sat at the kitchen table. She opened her laptop and looked up the local animal shelter's adoption page. Then, she looked up the local classifieds for missing person forums. The garden needed to be fed, and Evelyn was nothing if not a dedicated scientist.